Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are live for the last stream of the year and the final one-sided discussion on my part of Marvel's Star Wars 1977, the very first Star Wars comic ever written. Yes? See, doing all this setup stuff beforehand, I don't have to keep you guys waiting for the game to be ready. Just give me a moment. Yeah, but we have the last 9 chapters of the comic proper, and from there there will also be the 3 annual issues. Apparently, this was like the Marvel Star Wars original was a monthly series, so 1 issue per month, but apparently they occasionally did a special, they didn't go it for the entire year of the run, because there's only 3 annual issues, and the Marvel Star Wars went on for about 9 years, so it ended in 1986. So it seems they didn't, the annual thing didn't last all that long, but they weren't available on the particular on that original website, where a link in the description you can follow it along. That's why this one I had to include the link to another comic online website that actually do have the 3 annual issues. Hopefully the sound is all right. Let me just do a quick check. All right. Just make sure some of the things are all squared away. And we can begin with issue number 100. Again, anyone interested in following along in the description, there is the link to the website. And I say again, we're starting from issue number 100. Okay. All right. Now, a bit of a context, because there's a little bit more continuity for this one than the previous stream. And that is the fact that we have set up what is going to be sort of the major conflict that's going to be focused on for like the final few issues of the series. And that is the fact that even though the Rebel Alliance has finally defeated the Empire, we're firmly in the post-Return of the Jedi era. This technically means like this was the first Star Wars property to really go there, at least that I'm aware of. But of course, one of the problems that I actually did agree with that were like critiques of the old expanded universe, it was the fact that they never really seemed to give the characters a break. That whenever a new adventure or story had to be told, they felt they always had to do it with the classic original trilogy characters. And I believe I mentioned this before in a previous stream, but it was the idea that it felt like a very repetitive, like every other week it seemed, there was a new threat to the galaxy. And again, even when they did Legacy, which actually, is post, everybody else is dead by this point, they still couldn't quite tear themselves away from the Skywalker saga, because it was because the main character, Cade Skywalker, is a descendant of Luke. So, and this was something that a lot of people criticized the handling of the expanded universe before, where like, come on, we want other characters than just the Skywalker lineage. And of course, one of the things that even people who liked the sequel trilogies complained about with the whole thing with Rey was they decided to, once again, we're sort of tying it all to these singular damn bloodlines with the whole Palpatine's granddaughter thing. But anyways, we're post Return of the Jedi. The Rebel Alliance is trying to, they're calling themselves the Alliance of Free Planets. They're trying to set up a new government, essentially restore, the old Republic, freedom, democracy, and all that good stuff. But not only is the Imperial Remnant refusing to just lie down and die, There is now a new threat to the galaxy from outside of the Star Wars galaxy, in fact. Though later this would be retconned to being from the unknown regions. A race known as the Nagai, who are like these albino, elfish-looking things. They're like goth punk aliens. And basically, as I like to say, they are basically the Dark Eldar from Warhammer if they were somehow made PG. Very effete, very convinced of their own superiority, and they are utterly ruthless. Yes. And so, we open up on chapter 100 with preparations for a major alliance initiative against the Nagai. Let me just make sure I've got the location of where they're planning to go to. Oh, well, first, before that happens, the scene opens up, and admittedly, the final few issues of the series, the art quality really goes downhill. Well, it's not like, I wouldn't say it's the absolute worst, but it definitely feels like amateur hour compared to like a lot of the early stuff by Infantino. And let me see if I can find the art credits. Cynthia Martin is in charge of pencils, and Joe Duffy is the head writer. Archie Goodwin has long since sort of departed. And these are sort of the main writer-artist duo for pretty much the remainder of the series. And I think there are issues with the story, as we'll soon find out, but I think it is less to do with Duffy than the fact that, again, there's just not enough time, and as we'll soon see, the ending is kind of inconclusive, as that little bit I put in the description kind of gives away. But anyway, Cynthia Martin's art just isn't nearly as good as Infantino's or some of the other artists that worked on this series before. 108 issues over 9 years. Quite a few people got a chance to work on this one. It's just that, people like Goodwin and Infantino, and Jim Shooter is the only guy who's been there throughout the whole thing, because even now he is still the editor-in-chief of the series. But, otherwise it's been a lot of people changing hands over this. Yes, let me just check on something. Infantino. All right. So, for whatever reason, they've decided to open up Chapter 100 with Admiral Akbar giving, a speech, but for what turns out to be the preliminaries to essentially a test. They're basically putting everybody through a flight simulator, even, much to his own annoyance, Han Solo. As you can imagine, he wouldn't exactly be too keen on the idea of having to demonstrate his piloting skills and after he's already proven himself time and again, and of course the fact that they're doing it through an exam, which of course has little to no bearing on actually flying a ship, at least as he sees it. And it's the classic thing you see in a lot of, not just sci-fi, but a lot of military focused tropes where, all these simulations are just no substitute for the real thing. That classic trope. Nope. So anyway, everybody's there. Han and Luke and Lando are participating, as well as a couple of other characters. That's one thing that's interesting, because I didn't expect it in a series this early in Star Wars history. They actually bring back quite a few of the sort of the side characters that appeared in other story arcs. For example, they've brought in darn it, what's his full name? It's Fen something. Hold on. Fen Shisa, that's it. Yes, Fen Shisa, the Irish Mandalorian. Because yes, there are Mandalorians even in this early part of Star Wars, but apparently they're written to be that their dialogue is Irish. And he was a character that Leia interacted with during the search for Han Solo back when he was still in Carbonite. So anyways, all these people are there. Of course, they have Nia Numba because he's become a very familiar, iconic Return of the Jedi character simply because of his design. Because that's why the Sulistans are so recognizable nowadays. But anyway, they do their thing. Han just rolls his eyes and goes, "All right, fine." Wouldn't you know it, though? When the simulation is over, everybody passes, and I guess to do this, you gotta is what qualifies you for the mission against the Nagai. But it turns out that Han and Luke are the only ones who didn't pass because apparently the simulator computers were just not advanced enough to take account of Han's very erratic flying style, and of course Luke's use of the Force. And so, basically, they're having a lot of trouble getting proper results back from the tests. And so, I guess for some bizarre reason, Mon Mothma and Akbar say, "Well, sorry, but until we actually get something from the results, you two are grounded." Han is, of course, pissed off, and especially when he finds out that the simulation thing was Lando's idea, and that was simply because Lando was feeling like the Alliance leadership wasn't giving him and his friends much to do, and so when they made the offer of, "Hey, you mind maybe helping us out with this?" he just said fine. He had no idea. So of course, Lando's a bit more conventional than Han as a pilot, so he passed, and he's going to be going along. So Han is especially annoyed. And we sort of have a brief reintroduction of sorts to Bay, who was briefly introduced in the previous stream. He's basically this very unusually tall guy with white hair and an eye patch. And here we sort of get what we didn't get in the previous one. Again, they really should have had this sort of thing done in the previous chapter when he first appears. But basically, he is an old friend of Han, and this is the part where we sort of finally get to learn about their history. Of course, again, this is one of those things of Han Solo's backstory that would later be sort of pasted over by other better Star Wars stories, like the A.C. Crispin in Trilogy. So basically, in this version of Han's past, he basically grew up on the mean streets of Corellia instead of, being in a kind of Oliver Twist bind to a Fagin-like character. Dang it, I can't recall his name. Shrike, that's it. Shrike. I actually remembered his name. There we go. But yeah, it was basically an Oliver Twist Fagin kind of thing. And, he eventually runs away to become a star pilot. Well, here, he's basically just an urchin, in this version anyway, this very old comic. His starting up was just a kid on the streets, and he was one of the kids that was picked on by bigger kids. But it turns out that even in those days, Bay was really unusually tall for his age, and apparently he was but unlike the bullies, he was the kind of guy who would fight the bullies. Sort of like that kind of likable Big Brother-esque character, like Benny from The Sandlot. Seriously, if you have not seen a Sandlot, I highly recommend it. That is one hell of a great film. Even though it's set in the 60s, it's weird, but it really makes you feel gives you nostalgia. Even though the time period is even if it's not your time period, it just evokes a childhood in a fundamental way. And like I said, Bay was basically to Han what Benny was to Smalls. Sort of that, surrogate big brother who would stick up for him. Yeah. And in fact, Bay taught Han how to fight hand to hand and so the bullies couldn't pick on him as easily. And apparently, even after they grew up, Bay just wandered around from place to place, having no particular goal except a search for answers. And that he never knew his mother, who left when he was really young, and his father was apparently a bastard, which is why he ran away from home. And so basically, he's very set up to be like this very old friend. Han basically still regards him as a brother. And, you know, it's pretty well done. Again, I just wish that they had, like, incorporated this backstory into previous, in the chapter where he's first introduced. So anyway, again, the early part of the story here is just reintroducing a lot of the readers, because again, it's a monthly series. They really felt the need to, like, we've got to remind people of these characters in case, you know, because it's been a hot minute since the last issue came out. So we are reintroduced to Fen. We're properly introduced to Bay. We also are reintroduced to Leia's, basically her. I like to think of them as her boy band-esque fan club of the 4 Zeltrons. It's Maruk, Rahul, Bob, and John. So yeah, let's see. Anybody else we're reintroduced to? No, that's pretty much it for now. But anyway, so Han and Luke are left cooling their heels on Endor, while the Alliance, led by most strike force, including Lando, heads off to deal with the Nagai. Han's, of course, really grumpy about this. However, partly to have something to do, when they sort of go along with one of the Ewoks, Tippett, because he says that he's seen something odd out there in the bush. And so they go off looking. And it turns out they were wise to do so, because what the Ewoks have spotted is an early strike force of the Nagai, who apparently have deliberately set up things to lure the Alliance away from Endor so that they can strike at the leadership. And the leader of this strike force is Knife, the guy that Han and Chewie had to deal with on Kashyyyk, who wanted to try and restart the Wookiee slave trade, alongside Chewbacca's own brother-in-law, if you can believe it. Let's see. Ooh, no, I have not done the solo Star Wars story yet. I do plan to at some point. These it's kind of like part of the reason why I decided to have to sort of do some streams this December to talk about stuff that because like at this point, like so many Disney stuff has been such a bust. Even things like The Mandalorian that started out good, it's almost pointless to try and like create an integrated canon, because pretty much almost everything Disney Star Wars has produced has been hot garbage. Rogue One was really the only exception to the rule. But you know, it's too late to change the name of the series should this be canon. I've learned that, you know, when YouTubers like try to do a brand change, it doesn't always work so well. So I'm not taking that risk. But I'm still using this as an excuse to, even if I'm no longer that hard and set on the idea of canonicity, because again, it's been rendered moot by poor handling. Thank you very much, Mouse. I still am going to use this as an opportunity to talk about stuff, particularly from the old expanded universe, and maybe sort of people who have only been introduced to Star Wars via Disney, the newest generation. Like, you know, there's a lot of better Star Wars material out there. But yes, at some point I do wish to cover Solo. Oh, from what I understand, it's not terrible. It's just not particularly exceptional. You know, it's just it's a very mediocre film. But then again, I'm sort of avoiding because I don't even know the exact plot line of it. And that because I really want to make sure that I'm trying to go in as as unspoilered as possible, to see you know so that I can hopefully have a better opinion of a more accurate opinion of the movie when I finally do get around to it. But yeah, thank you for that question. Now let's see. And anyway, the reason I've decided to do streams specifically for things that I feel like aren't quite good enough to be the subject of a formal YouTube video, like I've done before, but stuff that I still want to talk about. Okay, so anyway, the Nagai have deliberately lured the rebels away from Endor to try and take out the leadership. Knife's in charge of them, and he's brought along some unusual friends, these big, hulking-looking robot things called Maccabees. They really look like these sort of old-timey sci-fi robots. Like, they wouldn't stand out too much on, say, the set of an old 50s film like The Forbidden Planet. Luke and Han are caught, they're discovered, rather, as they're spying on them. So Luke manages to escape because to their speeder bikes. Han is forced to use his speeder bike to crash one of the Maccabees because they seem impervious to blaster fire. And it turns out what looks like their heads are not. They sort of are that sort of thing where they have their faces set in the middle of their torsos. And it's not even clear just how much of them is organic and how much is machine. And yeah, Han ends up having to sacrifice his own speeder bike just to take out one of them. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, the Nagai are basically taking the rebels' fleet apart one piece at a time because they've already... Because apparently now, as if it weren't bad enough, there's a Nagai spy on Endor, and he basically fed them all the data from the recent simulator, so they literally know how the rebels are going to fight inside and out. And so Lando, luckily, is a quick thinker. He's basically forced to resort to being a bit more like Han, fighting much more unpredictably. And that enables them to actually start to get the drop on the Nagai as they aren't able to adjust as quickly to the change in tactics. But anyways, Luke doesn't make it back in time to prevent the Maccabees from assaulting the rebel command post, though he does arrive in time to help. And they are able to fend them off. So at least that works. Unfortunately for Han, the big disappointment comes when it turns out that Bay is the spy who, in fact, has been helping the Nagai launch their attack. And it's because, as mentioned earlier, he spent a lot of his life looking for answers, and specifically about his past. And it turns out that his mother was a Nagai scout who came to the galaxy, figured, this would be a good place to conquer, but let's wait until the rebels and the Imperials, wear each other out with their fighting. Leave the enemy that much more weak and exposed to us. And apparently, Bay was, despite being only half, being a hybrid, I wonder if this makes Bay the first hybrid alien, the first hybrid in Star Wars. Because I know that it's not very commonplace, but there are a couple of examples of, particularly humans and other aliens being able to have children together. I think even, what was its name? Oh yes, the Rebels cartoon series did that. So I think Bay might be the first hybrid in Star Wars. But apparently it seems, anyway, that the Nagai were pretty accepting of him, despite being half of their kind, because, usually that's not a big thing in Star Wars. At least not among bad guy races, anyway. And sometimes not even, among just the wider galaxy. And, for that, he's basically decided to help them. Although, of course, he didn't know that the Nagai were going to be teaming up with the Imperial Remnant. Or if that was even the plan at the time. Or just, something, we could always use some extra warm bodies to throw at the enemy. And, of course, because Bay is literally the guy who taught Han what he knows about fighting, he's able to overpower Han. But Bay still feels an attachment to Han because he was the closest thing he ever had to family before he discovered his roots. And so he's willing to let Han live. Unfortunately, Knife is not. So is not so tolerant, and is preparing to shoot Han. Bei intervenes to stop him because, you know, we're really establishing Bei's conflicted loyalties here. But then Han manages to shoot Knife, and Bei basically struggles to save him, despite the fact that Knife was about to kill Bei for, you know, going against him and stopping him from killing Han. And it's revealed here that when Bei rediscovered his mother's people, he not only found his mother, but he also found that she'd married one of her own kind and produced a son, and Knife was that son. So that makes him Bei's half brother. And at this point, though, Bei is more concerned with saving Knife, so he just lets Han go, and, you know, Han goes back to try and help the other rebels. But anyway, thanks to Lando's changing their tactics, the Alliance is able to at least win free of the Nagai and give their fleet a bloody nose. Nice. But anyway, it's pretty much official now, though many were reluctant to admit it. The Alliance of Free Planets is once again at war, and that's kind of how Chapter 100 ends. And so this is kind of going to be the principal focus of the remaining chapters, the conflict between the Alliance of Free Planets and the Nagai. Right. At least for a while, anyway. They do introduce a third factor later. But before we can do that, we once again have one of these stories where they decide to not be, deviate somewhere in the timeline, somewhere else. Because, you know, this is before. I don't know, like, where exactly, because they're not clear exactly when this is. Let me just quickly check and see if I can find out. Okay, we're still in the Return of the Jedi phase here. Post-Return of the Jedi phase. But this seems to be maybe, like, before the Nagai, but this is after they've introduced, you know, the 4 Zeltrons, who are basically Leia's boy band. Because they really do remind me of that sort of thing. If you've ever seen Gravity Falls, there's like an episode where they sort of poke fun of like the 90s boy band, and that's kind of what these 4 guys, the 4 Zeltrons, remind me of. They're very much like those characters, very simple-minded, but, you know, very well-meaning and innocent almost. So of course this is, I guess, surely before the conflict with the Nagai really ramps up. Because, like, it starts with Han and Leia having an argument, as, you know, they so often did back in those days. And hell, well, you know, they do kind of stop arguing once they marry, but at least they do kind of stop arguing once they marry, but but you know, they're still, like, you know, they don't agree on everything. But, you know, we're still at that point where it seems they're still having, like, these lover spats over stuff. And so Han's in a pretty sour mood about this latest one. And this is sort of where they sort of have this is supposedly the moment when Bei first arrived on Endor, as well as when Fen decided to join the Alliance and help out. So again, this is a little bit before the events of Chapter 100. We're now on 101. Let me see here. And basically, you know, Han sort of gripes to Bei about, you know, Leia, and how, like, he and she can't seem to stop arguing about stuff. And Bei is basically of the opinion, man, it's pretty clear that you two care about each other. You might want to try communicating a bit more, or especially if you're going to be serious about this. Of course, Han at this point is still a little too grumpy to take that advice, but he basically decides to go off and help run a test on these weird anomalies that have appeared in the local system of late. Neat. And so Han takes the Millennium Falcon up along with the droids and Pliff the Hoojib. For those of you who are new to this, The Hoojibs are these little bug-eyed rabbit aliens who are basically they're telepaths, and they feed on energy. So if they're hungry, make sure your blasters or any other tech isn't anywhere near them. But, otherwise they're very friendly, and they've played a fairly significant role helping out the Alliance a great deal, both during and after the fight with the Empire. And of course, because anyone who's familiar with Star Trek should know this, what do you think happens when someone decides to investigate a weird anomaly? Of course, something goes wrong, the Falcon gets sucked into it, and it transports Han and the droids, obviously the Falcon too, effectively somewhere across the galaxy. And hell, there's even some speculation of whether or not this is even the same universe. But anyway, they arrive on a seemingly very medieval planet. I mean, they do have guns, but they don't have guns. But it's otherwise pretty much, the aesthetic is like a medieval world. And it's in the middle of winter. And they arrive, and the Falcon crash lands just in time to intervene as these two aristocrats are being chased down by bandits. Of course, Han saves them. And the girl already starts swooning for the guy. It's funny, like, Leia's one of the few people that was able to resist the classic Han Solo charm for any length of time. Most women actually did find it hard to resist, you see. Let me see if I can get their names. Hold up. Whoops. That is what I get for distractions. Risa is the woman, Gil is the young man. They're basically come from two families that, it's the classic Romeo and Juliet thing. They've been at war with one another. However, at last, the families have decided, let's bury the hatchet and, let's marry our children as a way of uniting our families and possibly putting an end to the conflict. So, it's that classic thing. Although, of course, given how Risa is, as I've said, swooning over Han, that might well jeopardize that whole plan. And meanwhile, as everybody tries to fix the ship, Risa's father arrives along with his retainers and, of course, his vizier/court wizard. And, it's not quite the 90s just yet, but anyone want to guess? But like anyone can want to guess that he's going to be the bad guy. You would be correct. It's one of those tropes that's just a little too obvious at this point. I mean, it's one of those things that we've just been overexposed to over the years. But of course, anyway, for saving his daughter and, her betrothed, the king is more than willing to, do whatever he can to help Han. Meanwhile, Han is suspicious that something's not quite right about all this thing. And of course, now that he's separated from his friends and from Leia, it's now that he starts to think that, maybe Bay was right. I ought to, talk to Leia more about this instead of just walking away whenever we have an argument. But he, like I said, he suspects that something isn't quite what it seems. But thanks to after some consultation with Pliff and a few of his fellow Hoojibs who came along for the ride, he thinks he might have an idea on how to solve all of their problems. And basically, he starts playing people off. So the first thing he does is he finds a bunch of bandits, and he literally hires them to kidnap Gil. Hold on a moment. And basically, Han says, "Hey, Your Majesty, I'm technically doing you a favor here. Or if Gil is, because I've hired these guys to kidnap Gil. This will basically give you that much more of an advantage in dictating the terms of the alliance to his family. Of course, this solves Han's problem of ending Risa's attraction for him." Because, of course, she immediately starts the whole, "Oh, how could you? I hate you" routine. Because, they make it clear that the both of them are very young and pretty naive. Eve? But Han says, "Okay, fine, look, we'll just meet I've already arranged to meet with these guys, we'll bring the ransom, we'll get your fiancé back. How does that sound?" So they do, but of course the bandits are already in the employ of the Vizier. In fact, that was originally his plan from the beginning. Now let's see now. What exactly was his thing? Uncle Marius is his name. He's the king's brother. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it's mentioned earlier that the bandits, like the ones who were chasing after Gil and Risa, had always had the upper hand of the royal forces because they always seemed to know when to strike and when to retreat. And it seems that the Vizier has been the one feeding them the information. And somehow, it's never explained how, though it's supposedly something to do with the local technology that he's very good at. He's been manipulating the energy ball things, and that's part of the reason how Han and the Falcon ended up on this rock. Of course, Han, as a professional con man in his own time, is all too aware of this sort of thing, and in fact suspected the Vizier from the beginning, figuring that this was basically a ploy by him to try and usurp the throne for himself, because again, he's the classic evil Vizier character. So of course, when Han went out to this meeting with the bandits that, the uncle thought he was going to turn into an ambush, he let the royal guard know in advance so that they could follow behind them, and of course that's right when they show up to arrest the Vizier and the bandits. So there we go. The Falcon is repaired, and our heroes are on their way to go back to join up with the rest of the rebellion, with the Alliance. For some reason I keep getting those two mixed up. The Rebel Alliance and the Alliance of Free Planets. I guess it's not hard to see why. But yeah, Han goes back and basically he decides to, meet with Leia, and like him, she too is feeling, maybe we ought to meet each other halfway, for a change, and so, happy endings all around. So next, number 102. If you recall from the previous stream, anyone who didn't tune in, one of the fairly regular recurring characters they had here, that was an original creation, not from the films, was this Iskalonian fishman named Kiro, who left his world to fight the Empire alongside Luke and his friends. Well, he was basically killed by one of the Nagai, Den Siva, near the end of the previous stream. And so now Luke and Lando are having to feel like, we have, his friends and family ought to know what happened to him, so we're going back to convey the sad message, the sad news, as it were. And, Iskalon was once a pretty peaceful planet. The locals were very friendly, even to off-worlders. Well, that's kind of changed now. All the places where air-breathing races, the ones that couldn't do well in the water, are now completely, there's just wreckage now. This was partly due to an Imperial bombardment, but there's been no effort to rebuild them. And the seas are just lousy with sea serpents. Of course, it turns out that Iskalon's troubles have not ended with the fall of the Empire, because the Nagai are now here. And of course, they want to take over and use it as a base of operations. And they've been building this tower thing and basically capturing and interrogating, and of course torturing any Iskalonians they manage to capture, because they're all about getting as much information on their opponents as they can. They're very thorough people, the Nagai, as well as being incredibly ruthless, even to the point of sadism. So Luke and Lando end up fighting off a group of Nagai that were trying to capture some Iskalonians, including Lando's old friend Mon, who is the leader of the school, which is basically their social structure. Sure. Though usually, like the way it works, the leader is supposed to, it's weird, because they've never really fully explained this, because it's like a fascinating thing that would be worth going into in more detail, but they never quite delineate just how much the leader of the school dictates what the school does, and how much the leader is merely the representative of what the school collectively wants. Because the Iskalonians are very collectively minded. If like a decision is made and they're almost incapable of conceiving not going along with it. Like if someone decided to go against that or just went off to do his own thing, they would find that very bizarre and unusual. However, they also reveal that Kiro may in fact still be alive, because they say he's been here for quite some time then, helping fight the Nagai. Of course, Luke and Lando don't know what to make of this, especially seeing as how Luke saw Kiro go into that river on Kintuine, along with Den, the Nagai leader. Well, one of the Nagai leaders, I should say. And, they found evidence that Den had survived, but no evidence that Kiro had. But anyway, they decide in the meantime to help the Iskalonians take out the Nagai base of operations, which is this big tower thing that they've managed to erect in the middle of the ocean, presumably on some kind of, shallowly submerged mountain. But in the course of the fighting, as they sabotage the tower so that it collapses, they also free the Iskalonians that have been taken prisoner, and they do discover that, yes, Kiro is alive, in fact. However, the reason that he never has mentioned this is simply that he feels that he has to help his people. But this is something that I do feel I don't really agree with how they handle this. He's decided that he doesn't want anyone to know that he's still alive, and that includes Dani, the Zeltron, who by this point, had started to actually fall for him. And so, she's been pretty devastated by it, and yet he doesn't want her to know that he's still alive. And he doesn't really give any kind of good explanation. Like, I can understand, like, not joining the Alliance, sticking to helping out his people, but to not let Dani know he's alive is kind of, he doesn't really give a good reason, and so it comes off as sort of a dick move. And especially this is the case when we get to the next chapter, number 103, because here it's made clear that Dani is still very emotionally distraught. Zeltrons are even at this early point, they've established that Zeltrons are a very emotional people. They feel very strongly about most things, and usually, they're very fun-loving. They're always about having a good time, PG rated or otherwise. Because as I like to say, the Zeltrons are also the closest thing that Star Wars gets to horny on main. an alien race that's horny on main, I should say. Okay. But anyway, we're also sort of getting a look at things from the Nagai side, because apparently Den, the guy who killed Kiro, and more to the point, the guy who tortured Danny in order to extract information about her people from her, or at least try to, apparently he has a weird sort of attachment to her. He seems that he basically, the chapter opens up with him musing about, like, I wonder where you are now. Are you thinking of me? Do you still hate me? You probably do. And, like, he doesn't seem put out by this in any way. For whatever reason, I wouldn't say that he's attracted to Danny, but he's certainly intrigued by her. And by, her race in general, the Zeltrons. So anyway, the chapter opens up with him being brought into a meeting with Knife, who seems to be in overall command of this Nagai expedition against the Alliance. Apparently he did survive that blaster shot Han gave him on Endor. And basically they have Knife is about to interrogate a captured Alliance prisoner, and they discuss a scout patrol that's gone missing on, what's the name of the planet? Trenwith, that's it. Anyway, the focus here is mostly on Leia and, her four-man boy band. And they basically come to investigate what's happened here, and it seems like there's no one left alive on the planet. It's literally just a wasteland of destroyed buildings and dead bodies. Some of them are local, some of them are Nagai, and some are of a race that they've never seen before. More on that later. However, they also run into who seems a Nagai survivor. And of course, he's very hostile, but they do manage to subdue him. And partly because he is injured and weak from hunger. Leia sees an opportunity to basically, we're going to take him prisoner, maybe take him back to our leaders for questioning, but at the very least, we can maybe find out what's going on. Unfortunately, this Nagai does not speak Galactic Standard, so it's and nobody is on the Alliance side has yet learned how to speak the Nagai language, so communication is pretty much out of the direct communication anyway is out of the question. But Leia is all for trying to be as at least as friendly as the situation as the situation allows, I should say, with this Nagai, and sort of figure out if she try and establish a dialogue with him. One point though, he just tries to grab her and escape, because he's clearly a soldier and he feels like his mission is to capture enemy, maybe get away and stuff. But again, he is easily subdued because it's 1 against 5. However, this time they sort of tie his arms and legs. They didn't the first time, and this guy reacts with horror to being restrained, to the point where Leia just decides that, okay, fine, I'll free you from your bindings, but none of that funny business that you tried to pull. And this actually seems to be, for the first time, actually manages to get through to this Nagai, as he stops being hostile and, if anything, seems intrigued by Leia. Apparently, mercy is a very alien concept to his race. Which, again, makes perfect sense for a race that, according to the artist Cynthia Martin, and was sort of inspired by her reading a Japanese vampire manga Alas, we have no idea what the title was. I like to think that it was Vampire Hunter D, but then again, that was a book series originally, not a comic. So who knows? But yeah, it sort of makes sense that these guys would find mercy an unusual thing, being spared by an enemy. And it's here that we that during this time, well, Leia and the guys basically keep an eye on the observe, I should say, the other strange aliens. And in fact, we learn from a flashback of the Nagai pilot that the reason why he's afraid of being restrained is because he has a memory of being tied up and essentially tortured by one of those weird of these new aliens that have been encountered on Trenwith, I think it is? Trenwith? Darn it, what is the name? Because I literally said it a few minutes ago. Oh. Yeah, it is Trenwith. I did get it right, yeah. So anyway, they observe them, and these guys are basically these big, well, they're yellow in this chapter, but like in most other chapters afterwards, they're these green, sort of portly humanoids. Like, they're green skinned, they're kind of fat, and they all dress like 17th century Europeans. As in, like, you know, the lace collars. Well, there's the doublets and, you know, the long curly hair. So, like, look up Louis like people like Louis XIV or Charles II. It's basically that kind of hairstyle that these guys seem to have. Like, it's very 17th century. Mm-hmm. But again, you know, we don't learn anything about them apart from the fact that they seem to be the enemies of the Nagai. And if anything, the Nagai, particularly this pilot guy, seems utterly terrified of them. And so, you know, this leads everybody to wondering, you know, what could possibly be so terrible that a Nagai would be frightened by it. In the end, I guess, Leia decides to show a bit of extra mercy and not even take this guy back with them to be questioned by the Alliance. She decides to just let him go, while she and the boys head back to report what they found to the Alliance leadership. Meanwhile, and then so we then cut to later, where we finally learn this guy's name. Wing Commander Tai. He makes his report to Knife and Den about how he was caught by the Alliance, but they spared him. And basically, because again, the Nagai are famously ruthless at this point, Knife kills him, literally throws a knife into his chest for, you know, accepting the mercy of the enemy to survive. Because, you know, by the standards of their own race, this makes Tai a coward and a weakling. So they sort of do a sad, tragic ending, where, you know, it kind of would have been better if they had taken him prisoner. Gotta wet the old whistle here. But yeah, it's a pretty sad ending they pull here. So the next chapter, number 104, is basically our main original trilogy cast on a diplomatic mission to Zeltros, basically to let their leadership, who is apparently a monarchy, know that, you know, unfortunately we're back at war again, and there's stuff we need to talk about. But of course, you know, the Zeltrons are all very easy, you know, except for Dani, because she's still traumatized by, you know, being tortured and losing the man she loves. And again, it really doesn't, they really don't give Kiro a good reason to not at least let her know that he's still there, that he's still alive. And it does kind of make him come off like either, like an insensitive dick, frankly. And which is a shame because Kiro was a pretty good character. But anyway, you know, apart from Danny, everybody is having a good time because it's always a party on Zeltros. And like literally, the king and queen are all like, let's just, you know, we're glad to have you. Let's throw a party. Oh, you have business? Oh, very well, fine. Oh, very well, that's fine. You know, if your duty and your scruples demand that you must. But then, you know, we'll have a party after you've told us what you need to tell us. And then, you know, after we've had the discussion the next day over what we're going to do about it, we'll have another party. Because again, the Zeltrons are a very, very free and easygoing race. Nice. And so, you know, of course, all the Zeltron ladies are throwing themselves at Luke and Lando, the only, you know, who are the unattached members of the party. You know, luckily, Leia not only has Han to defend her virtue from any Zeltron men with any ideas, but the boy band, it seems, is also prepared to defend the princess's honor, as it were. So, you know, she's at least got plenty of chaperones in that regard. However, it seems that while they're off to, you know, inform the Zeltrons of what's that they're, you know, having to go back to war, the Nagai, led by Den Siva, the guy that tortured Danny and supposedly killed Kiro, are planning to basically suddenly do a sneak attack and take the Zeltron leadership hostage. They don't know the rebels are there, the Alliance people are there. But of course, you know, that's not going to bother them. More prisoners is all the better for them. However, the Nagai aren't the only ones up to no good. And we're sort of reintroduced to the Hiromi, who, or as I like to call them, the Looney Tunes cockroach aliens. And I really do mean this. If you look up an image of these guys, and it's spelled the way it sounds, Hiromi, they look like the way they're drawn. They look like Looney Tunes, like if Looney Tunes had like a cockroach character. They're big. They're green. They're really, really stupid. And they're kind of what hurts the Nagai storyline, you know, the war between the Alliance and the Nagai, because like again in the previous arc, in the previous stream, I should say, we've sort of established that the Nagai are, you know, PG Dark Eldar. They're these ruthless guys. And, you know, we've even established now in the previous chapter just how cold-blooded they are and how utterly dangerous they are. And you know, the fact that they tortured Danny and, you know, tried to torture Luke as well, they're really nasty people. And so this is it's fairly dark stuff, and yet at the same time we also give a lot of you know, for lack of a better word, page time to these bumbling clowns. But anyway, of course, the Hiromi have their own ridiculous plan to take over Zeltros in the name of the great Hiromi people and their glorious destiny of conquest, because apparently that's a thing. And so basically they end up running into Luke, but of course they're so incompetent they don't take the proper now, apart from like tying Luke's wrists, they don't take any measures to really like restrain him or make sure that he can't escape. So Luke, if anything, finds this all rather comedic. And so he basically just lets them take him prisoner for a while, just to like figure out what exactly these bozos are planning. Meanwhile, there's sort of a brief argument between Danny and Leia, because apparently, you know, given that it's understandably, but it's still kind of crazy heel turn, given how, you know, Danny was tortured by the Nagai and they also killed the man she loved, because again, Kiro doesn't want her to know he's still alive, the fishy dick. She's apparently gone to the position of, like, all Nagai must die. Aye. However, if we recall the previous chapter, Leia had discovered that the Alliance isn't the only enemy of the Nagai. There are those weird big, portly green aliens. And she's wondering if maybe, if there is a, because these guys are also right bastards, maybe there might be a chance for peace if they're peace. But, you know, Danny's not exactly in the mood for that kind of thing. And so, you know, Leia tries to, you know, say, you know, I understand, because, you know, she did lose her whole planet to the Empire, because, you know, no one's going to forget the destruction of Alderaan. But unfortunately, you know, Danny's not in the mood to be reasonable. And it's at that moment that Den arrives. And with a little help from Knife, manages to capture the two ladies. Yeah, I think it's Knife who helps him capture her. Let me quickly check. Oh, no, it's not Knife, but it is another Nagai. So anyway, meanwhile, you know, back with Luke, the Hiromi are again basically showing what ridiculous idiots they are, because at this point they're already convinced, like, yeah, we basically, well, we've got we haven't actually captured the royal king and queen, but we've got like the ballroom surrounded, we've got a prisoner, and they already figure, well, victory is ours, we've taken over a planet, hooray! And it's at this moment that another shoe drops, for lack of any better term, as we get a proper introduction to those green 17th century wearing aliens that the Nagai are so afraid of, the Toph. They also come from, you know, in this comic they say they're from another galaxy, but later on this is sort of retconned to be they're from the unknown regions, because, you know, they haven't yet established the unknown regions yet, this early in Star Wars. And basically the Toph, and it turns out that one of the reasons that the Nagai came to you know, this part of the galaxy where the Alliance and the Empire are, is because they were running away from the Toph. So, you know, the Nagai have proven themselves to be very dangerous. Now we're basically being told that there's a race that's even more dangerous. So, yeah. Not exactly a fun time for anybody except for the Toph. Of course, you know, as it turns out, the Hiromi are just as cowardly as they are incompetent. And so it doesn't take much for, you know, Luke, of course, frees himself and kicks some alien ass. And afterwards, he basically gets the Hiromi to sort of side with him. And because, like, and of course, you know, they're so intimidated by the Toph that the Hiromi are going like, oh yeah, sure, we've always been, you know, loyal to the Alliance, yay, freedom, and all that stuff. Because again, these guys are basically Looney Tunes characters. Now, of course, you know, nobody outside of the Star Wars galaxy has heard of Jedi, so already Luke has a pretty distinct advantage over the opposition here. Meanwhile, let me quickly check, make sure I'm not mixed up. Yeah, basically, the Nagai have brought in, like, Leia and Danny. Because it turns out, actually, Leia, Danny, and Den are caught by the Tophs. And apparently, again, I'm not convinced that it's romance or attraction, but Den certainly seems let's call it his interest in Danny is to the point where one of the Toph is like, all right, we want you to basically lure your guys over here so we can take him prisoner. Oh, you don't want to? How about then we kill these two ladies and see if that'll make you cooperate? And apparently the fact that Danny is threatened by the Toph is enough to convince Den to, you know, sell out his own people to them. Again, I wouldn't go so far as to say attraction, but there is some kind of, but I guess he feels some kind of odd connection to her. Not that Danny appreciates it, because again, this is the guy that tortured her and killed Kiro. Luckily for, and of course at this point is, Den does his thing. He leads in his fellow Nagai, and the Toph basically ambush and subdue them. So the situation. Our heroes have only traded one set of captors for another. Luckily, Pliff and the Hoojibs have accompanied them on this diplomatic mission, and both the Toph and the Nagai view the Hoojibs as just non-sentient little animals, basically vermin. And of course, the Hoojibs are able to use their telepathy to get an idea of what they want and what they're planning. And, are able to distract them to help the others get free. Of course, then Luke shows up, does his Jedi thing. The Hiromi kind of try to contribute. Ooh, excuse me. Leia and Danny get freed thanks to the Hoojibs, while Luke basically decides, okay, we've subdued some of the Tophs here, but let's see if we can't take out their command ship. And of course, the brave and stalwart Hoojibs are only too happy to accompany him, albeit with some persuasion. And of course it actually works, though it's mostly down to, Luke's leadership and the guidance of the Force. They do manage to get aboard the Toph flagship, mostly because their own vessel is so tiny and the Toph are so arrogant, they just let them come right up and up, almost to the point where they can just land. And then basically the Hoojib go, well no, the Hiromi go off to sabotage one part of the ship. Luke basically causes a distraction. So they sort of take out the Toph command ship. And then, they come back, they beat the other Tophs and save the day. Okay, all is right with the world. And of course, unfortunately, the fact that Den, actually cooperated with the Tophs, his people's hated enemy, means that he is basically now persona non grata among his own race. And so he's like, well, I don't have anywhere else to go, so why not negotiate my terms of surrender to the Alliance of Free Planets, or even better, maybe consider the possibility of an alliance between the Alliance and my people. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but now it's and they actually do this in the very next chapter where they establish that the Nagai and the Toph, the Nagai are sort of going to be allied with the Alliance against the Toph because it seems the Toph are just worse than the Nagai. However bad the Goth aliens are, the weird 17th century greenskins are even worse. And if the Nagai, like Den, are to be believed, it was the Toph that taught them, cruelty, because that was what they did to them all the way back when. And in their home part of space. Ace. And so at this point, that's basically, we've now blown through, chapters 105, 104, and 106. We're now at chapter 107. Technically, the very last chapter of the main series, barring the 3 annual issues that I will cover. But actually, I think it's more appropriate to sort of do the annuals first. So let me first get that, because again, there's a link in the description to the website that's, unlike the first one, actually does have the annual issues. Because these kind of connect to events much earlier in the series, these 3 annuals. So give me a second. Okay, so the very first one, annual issue number 1, takes place pretty much right after A New Hope. Where basically everybody's on this this other little planet, and of course they run afoul of the local despot, this woman with green skin and bat wings. Let me see if I can. What's her name? Darn it. What is the name of the of that damned woman with the wings? Darn it. My mind is blanking and I'm trying to find the damned name. Yes, the Magistrix of Sky. Basically, she is really, real nasty, a real bitch. And of course, she basically walks around like she owns the place, because for all we know, she does. And she has these giant bodyguard that she calls catumans. Not exactly a very subtle name, because they're literally giant muscular catmen in loincloths, because why not? And, Leia and Luke have to sort of give them the slip in this, this local city they happen to be in. And they make it back to the Falcon, and thankfully, with some help from Chewie and Han. Because apparently the droids had figured out something was wrong and sort of, yeah. I don't think they really explain how the droids knew what was going on, because they weren't with Luke and Leia. But anyway, they sort of were able to get on the comm, for lack of any better word, and let the smuggler and the Wookiee know that something was up. We are briefly introduced to an acquaintance of Han, Katya, who's basically, she's a human woman, and she basically looks like she walked right out of a blaxploitation film. She's got like the full 70s afro and everything. And it's kind of, and of course, you have to wonder why they bothered introducing her, because they kill her off just a few pages later. Like, apparently the Magistrix of Sky has some really weird allies. And this thing that's basically like a demon made out of smoke just slips aboard the Falcon and just kills Katya just like that. It nearly kills Luke, though somehow, even though it's immune to blasters, it is not immune to lightsabers, and so Luke barely manages to kill that. But of course, having his life force almost completely sucked away, has done a number on his constitution. So for the time being, he's kind of out of the action. Oops, hang on a moment. Yeah, there we go. Basically, they have to if they're able to just get aboard the ship, they've got to take off. And so they leave, but it seems that the Magistrix had already anticipated this, as she basically had her smoke demon not just kill Katya and then try to kill Luke, but it left behind a hologram projector that allows her to basically do the whole taunting thing. You've walked right into my trap. And the Falcon ends up getting shot down on this world of people that are basically the same race as the Magistrix. Apparently they're not big fans of the Magistrix, the winged people. But they don't really have much of a choice. She's basically been able to tyrannize over them, and she has, with the help of the Empire, I should say. And so initially they're figuring, well, we don't like doing this, but our leader has made it, our tyrant leader has made it clear that anyone affiliated with an enemy of the Empire is to be handed over to the Empire, because they've got a garrison on this world. However, when Leia and Luke are brought before the council, the ruling council of this world, to face judgment for apparently the crime of, setting foot on their world, Luke tries to bring out the lightsaber, and they recognize it and think, could he be the chosen one? Because apparently they've got a prophecy, although that's not explained just yet. But apparently this makes them think, oh, if you are the person we think you might be, then we will help you. And, overthrow the Empire that's been tyrannizing our world with the help of the Magistrix. And they kind of have this funny way of doing it. They have Luke and Leia wear these big wing suits and anti-grav belts so that they can, pass for their race. Because, these wing riders are just a common sight in the skies of this world, so the Imperials at first don't give them any notice. And it's only when they get close and to see that, wait a minute, those two with them are humans, and that, it's already too late. Ah, darn, I was hoping I could. Oh, I almost did. Yeah, kind of got him. And apparently, this is part of the and this seems to fulfill the prophecy. They defeat the Empire, they overthrow the Magistrix, because, Luke's able to basically beat her in an air duel, his very first. Don't know if he ever does that how many other times. Meanwhile, Leia manages to get inside the base, and at least the Imperial base, and save Han and Chewbacca. And so that's pretty much it. With, Chewie, the Catamans don't stand a chance, because it's pretty clear that in close quarters combat, Wookiees are just the toughest badasses in the Star Wars universe. Your only hope of even putting one down is to have a blaster in your hand. Never engaging CQC with a Wookiee. But anyway, the day is saved, and basically here the prophecy is explained, because apparently, back during the Clone Wars, the Wind Riders say that Obi-Wan Kenobi and his apprentices, because apparently, this is before they've established the whole one master, one apprentice thing in the prequels. They basically came and sort of helped them out in the Clone Wars, and basically Obi-Wan figured, if you ever need help, the Jedi will always be there to answer, because we're the guardians of truth and justice in the galaxy. And this kind of evolved into the prophecy, and that's why they were willing to help Luke once they saw his lightsaber and reckoned him to be a Jedi Knight. Right. Of course, this is definitely before Empire, so Luke has no idea about the connection between his father and Darth Vader. So he figures, my father, helped free these people when they were under threat. Right. I hope one day to be a great Jedi just like him. Just really lay on the irony of Luke wanting to be like his father pre-Empire Strikes Back. Oops. And so that's annual number 1. Give me a quick second. Annual number 2 is well, actually, let me look up the date. When was annual 1? Because obviously in the last chapters of the main series, we're definitely into like 1986. Let's see. Annual number 1 was December 4, 1979. So that was actually just before 1980, the year that The Empire Strikes Back came out. Let's see. Annual number 2. That one is 1982. So August 1982. So post-Empire. And indeed, the story, as you might expect, with a lot of the story in this comic that was set between Empire and Return of the Jedi, Luke, it focuses on Luke and Lando searching for Han. they go to this weird planet where everybody looks like they're human except they're all bald. Let's see. And let's see. They basically, they're going around looking for answers, asking questions, and then they stumble upon this place where there's literally a statue of Han, and apparently the local priest, a man named Vetter Pine, basically explains that this statue was erected in honor of Han because he once saved their world from tyranny many years ago. This is clearly back, in the smuggler days, pre A New Hope. And apparently, this particular statue is literally made out of it's weird, like science magic stuff where it's like space magic, where it's like the rock that it's carved from acts as like a natural recorder. And so literally the priest activates it, and you just hear and basically the rest of the chapter is everybody listening to a recording of Han's voice telling him what happened. So this is years ago. Oh, obviously, like I said, back in the smuggler days. Han basically figures, here's a place where we can round up apparently a place called something called Sasana. I'm guessing it's a kind of spice. And they don't really say exactly what it is, but Han's just there looking for opportunities. And unfortunately, because this is a pretty homogenous world, he has to leave Chewie behind. As while a regular human might stand out on a planet of nothing but bald people, a Wookiee would stand out even more. So Chewie has to stay behind on the Falcon. And of course, it turns out that this world has got, this tyrant called the Satab. And, he just runs roughshod over everybody. Nobody likes him. The pretty standard thing. But it seems, though, like Han gets into trouble when he says the word Sansama and this at the local bar. Because apparently the clientele, this somehow makes them think that he's on the side of the Satab, and they try to beat him up. So, not exactly the warmest of welcomes. Even on even on a planet like this. Let me see. Han narrowly escapes, and in fact arrives just in time to thwart an attack on this woman who is basically the Satab's ward. Her name is Chrysala. And basically, they're a rebel's trying to attack her, but Han managed to save her in time. So not exactly helping his reputation in the eyes of the common people, though it does win the approval of the Satab, the tyrant leader of this place. So, he has Han brought over to the palace for this. Han basically figures, well, maybe this is a chance to get my hands on some Sasana. Again, whatever the heck that is. Now, apparently the way that the Satab controls the people is that he has this artifact called the Shade Shine around his neck. And it basically just gives him almost, but not quite, almost godlike magical power. Like, the guy that threw the bomb at Chrysala's escort is brought in, and the Satab only touches him, and he literally just like makes him age like like Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade style, to the point where he just collapses as like little more than a mummified skeleton, like a mummy. That's basically what he is at that point. So kind of sours Han's appetite more than a little, because that's a pretty disturbing sight even at the best of times. However, Han thinks that he might still have a lead on things. Well, one, the Satab forces him to give up his gun, because he's got all the guards. Han's not exact guards, and they've got spears at his throat. But once Han complies, he's all friendly again. But Han sticks around mostly because he notices that the Satab uses Sasana in his food. So he figures, well, there's got to be a supply here. I can get my hands on that and sell it for profit. So one night he sneaks out of his chamber, basically hoping to see if he can find the Sasana supply in the palace. He ends up running into Chrysala, though, and she seems to be under the impression that he escaped his chamber specifically to visit her. And Han decides not to disabuse her of that, since there are guards coming. And there are worse places to hide than in a pretty lady's bedchamber. But of course, Star Wars is still a pretty PG-rated stuff, so we don't get a sex scene. Instead, we get Chrysala talking to Han about the situation. She's she's basically the Satab's ward, for lack of any better term. Though, it's a bit more risque than that. Let me just quickly make sure I've got this particular thing right. Of course, though, the Satab of apparently that shade shine allows him, among other things, to see whatever he wants. So again, it's basically nigh on godlike powers. Yeah, she makes it clear that she's basically the Satab's bed warmer. But, one, it's still a better life than what she had as a dirt poor peasant, and two, she doesn't have a choice in the matter, so there's that. And basically she explains to Han her circumstances and how the Satab uses the shade shine to do his thing. And apparently the way that he killed the would-be insurgent was that he speeded up his metabolic processes, thus causing him to artificially age very rapidly. So Han manages to slip out of her chamber and get back to his without being spotted by the bad guys. And so the next morning, however, of course the Satab has been aware of this all along, and apparently he's got plans for Han because he refers to him as the One. Though what exactly that is, we are, of course, to find out later. The next morning, the Satab decides to give Han a tour of his realm, as it were, and on this occasion decides to show off the mines. Though what exactly they're mining, it's unclear exactly. It's some kind of material. Well, some kind of mineral. However, one of the Satab's lackeys activates some kind of booby trap because it summons in a giant monster. Though, of course, Han is able to kill it by some quick thinking and basically shooting a stalactite that falls down and impales the monster. And the insurgents see this and are like, if he's really just the Satab's lackey, why did he save those innocent miners? Because, you know, the Satab is a ruthless tyrant. He doesn't go in for that sort of thing. Is he friend or foe? Well, ultimately they decide, well, it doesn't matter. We've got our own plans. Hopefully he doesn't get in the way. You know, this newcomer. And apparently, though, the Satab decides to basically, he's about to give Han his own on the Shade Shine. Because apparently the Satab has announced, well, this has all been like very secret tests of your abilities. I have decided that you will be my successor. He's about to hand Han the Shade Shine, the weird amulet that is the source of his powers. But then the insurgents try to assassinate the Satab, but they're caught. Because again, the Shade Shine gives the Satab an all-seeing eye, essentially. So, you know, the Satab is all like, well, that's that. Now, where were we? However, Chrysala, it seems, seizes the Shade Shine from the Satab and runs away and tries to run away with Han and it. And basically, what she reveals to Han is that all the Satabs... Whoops. Haha, that's what I get for extra life. Apparently, the Shade Shine is basically, it's a double-edged sword. It grants its user, you know, nigh godlike power, but at a price. And that price is that eventually it enhances the user's senses to the point where everything around, where they become like hypersensitive, like they are able to feel the very molecules of air impacting against their skin. And what's more, the power literally starts to burn them out from the inside. And so far, no Satab in history has managed to figure out how to, you know, make that not happen. And so instead, what the Satabs have done is that they find a successor, they give them the Shade Shine. Apparently on the very contact with the Shade Shine basically begins the process. It's, you know, again, enhancing your power while also eventually overwhelming you. And then what they do after they've gotten a successor is they go into, and before, you know, the Shade Shine kills them, they go into this magical suspended animation chamber. In the end, you know, the Satab is defeated. In this case, he doesn't make it to the suspension chamber before the Shade Shine ends up killing him. But of course, because Chrysala grabbed the Shade Shine, because she apparently because, you know, once again, the legendary solo charm has done its thing. She's got a thing for Han, and she decided that she would rather suffer the consequences of what the Shade Shine does rather than see him suffer it. And so, basically, she decides to enter the suspended animation chamber now. Because basically, they're all going to stay there in the hopes that someday somebody finds a way to, you know, I guess for lack of a better term, break the Shade Shine's curse. And so, you know, but, you know, because Han played a role in overthrowing the Satab, he is a venerated hero on this world, and that's why he has the, you know, the talking statue of him. And that's basically, you know, the annual 1 ends, and, you know, Luke and Lando depart. And, you know, that's that. So let's see. Now for annual number 3, the last of the 3 annual issues. And what was the date for that one? Annual 3 was August 1983. So post Return of the Jedi. All right. Well, technically, because the date is set after Return of the Jedi, but the story itself is clearly still set before Return of the Jedi. Right, because Han is again completely absent here. And this, if you recall, I believe it was either the previous one or the one before it, there was the storyline where Luke, along with his friends and this other rebel pilot, Barney, contended with this person that they somehow knew and had met before named Flint, who had been trained in the ways of the Sith by Vader. But then, had a change of heart and, sacrificed himself to save everybody in the end. This is basically Flint's origin, in a way. Because originally, our heroes arrive on this planet Belderone. And I think it's a world that's appeared more than once in the expanded universe, although I don't recall exactly where. Here. But anyway, basically they're here because the rebels have set up a base on the nearby world of Kolthis. But, there's an Imperial presence, and they're figuring, well, the Empire's planning something. They might try to attack our base soon. We've got to see what they're up to. Oh, give me a moment. And so, basically, they're here to investigate, Leia, Luke, Lando, the droids. And basically, of course, the main principal focus characters are Barney and Flint. So, they're basically two local boys, and they're kind of like what Luke was like before he left Tatooine. Very much wide-eyed, wanting more than anything to leave his dull homeworld behind and see the adventure among the stars. But of course, unlike Tatooine, Belderone is a strong Imperial presence, so not only is it dull, but they also basically have to spend at least a good chunk of their daily lives slaving away for the Empire. Not fun, by any stretch. So, of course, Flint is apparently the really excitable one. Barney is sort of the more reasonable one of the two. That classic dynamic. And apparently, the only other significant figure here is Flint's mother, who, very protective of him, very worried. And, because apparently Flint is that kind of kid that, the neighbors will say, oh, he's going to get himself in trouble one of these days. And so, basically what happens is they find that after some questioning around, because they decide to try. Well, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. The other thing is that the Vader plays a big role here. In fact, Vader is here looking after the Empire's interests. However, he senses Luke's presence, and of course, his big obsession is to find his son and bring him over to the dark side. However, much to Vader's annoyance, one of his subordinates, Admiral Andrin, decides to show a little initiative by hiring assassins to either kill or capture Luke. And of course, like a lot of Imperial officers, he kind of discounts the power and efficacy of the Force. So, of course, his assassins fail, and in fact, the last one kills himself to avoid being caught, so pretty hardcore by Imperial standards. And, of course, Vader responds as you would expect him to respond, by basically force-choking Admiral Andrin. Because now, thanks to his bungling, Luke knows that the Empire, the rebels, and Luke especially knows that the Empire is aware of their presence now. Which means it's going to be that much harder to catch them. However, Barney and Flint, they're not exactly fond of the Empire, it seems, so they decide, we'll help them. We're going to show them what the Empire is doing. Exactly, give them the information they want. And so they lead them to what turns out to be a building yard for AT-AT walkers. Luke, unfortunately, let me quickly check something here. Yeah, basically, the AT-AT start marching towards Belderone, the main settlement, because apparently the Empire figures, well, we've got them all. We're now ready to attack Kolthis. We know it doesn't really matter, just level the place. So, you know, typical evil scumbag Empire stuff. It's weird. Because, like, I can get some people being, like, some characters in universe being deluded enough to think, or, you know, deceived into thinking the Empire is the good guys. It's because, you know, there are plenty of characters that are like that and they're handled well, but the part that gets me is that there are, like, seem to be unironic, real life Empire fans among the, like, the fandom. No, I just do not get that. But anyway, Flint and Barney immediately realize what's going on. They, you know, try to take a speeder to run back and save their, you know, Flint's mother and the rest of the town. But Flint crashes the speeder, which is sort of foreshadowed early on by, you know, his mother warning him that one of these days, if he goes too fast, he'll crash. And, you know, that is what happens. Meanwhile, Lando, Leia, and Luke manage to hijack two of the walkers and, you know, take out some of the Imperials. And so the damage isn't completely wholesale, but it's still pretty severe. But, you know, the attack on Kolthis has been thwarted because the walkers have been dealt with. Unfortunately, Flint wakes up the next morning and discovers that not only is his home destroyed, but his mother is dead. And at this point, Vader basically walks up to him and says, hey, you hate being helpless, not being able to help the people you care about? I can give you that power. And so, you know, it's this is sort of how they explain how Flint became a guy for the Empire. But it's not really done well, frankly. Because, again, the Empire are the ones responsible for killing his mother. Then again, like, they do make a good try of it, because, like, afterwards... Because, you know, this is how Barney joins the Rebel Alliance in the aftermath of Belderone being leveled. Now, let me see if I can find the exact dialogue, because it is pretty good. Let me see now. Let's see. Here we go. Yes. You know, Leia says, you know, we're sorry about your friend. Barney says, don't be. It wasn't your fault. You didn't bring trouble to us. It was here from the day the Empire set up that factory. Luke then says, I wish I could believe Flint saw things the same way you do. Thanks for joining us, by the way. And Barney says, what's to thank? My entire family was killed and I've always hated this place. There's nothing for me here. This is just what I've dreamed of, what I've wanted all my life, except this time it's no game. I'm going to get my chance, join the rebellion, maybe find someone who can really train me to be a Jedi Knight. Like Flint has, you know? One of the neighbors saw him go, heard him talking to that Imperial Lord. He said Flint sounded certain and even happy. Maybe he was never interested in the rebellion and the Empire, or good and evil as he thought. Maybe all he ever really wanted was power, and it just took this to make him see it. So don't blame yourselves about Flint. I don't know. Maybe it's possible he could still be saved, or maybe he's been lost for years and I just never saw it. Because in spite of all that's happened, I can't get over the feeling that maybe Flint has finally gotten what he really wanted all along. I mean, it's genuinely good dialogue. I still think it could have, like, you know, Flint deciding to side with the Empire could have been done better. But, you know, they give it a good college try. And Barney's speech is a pretty decent one. And, you know, cleverly, as he concludes that speech, they cut over to Flint looking at a picture of his mother or in stormtrooper armor. And, you know, the final panels show stormtroopers boarding a ship with Vader looking on. Again, it doesn't quite it doesn't. I don't feel it quite justifies this decision to side with the Empire, given what they did and what they're responsible for. But it's weird. But it's not terrible. Well, it's just like not as well done as it could have been, or frankly should have been. And with that, we come to we're back to like the final chapter, number 107, the last chapter of Marvel Star Wars 1977. Apparently, they technically decided to add a 108th chapter back in 2009. Marvel did. But apparently, I think I'm gonna do that. Treat that as its own separate thing because to see just how well Marvel, current day Marvel, decided to handle this old property of theirs. But anyway, we're done with the annuals. We're back to Marvel, to the main line, number 100, issue 107, the final one. And basically, it's like sometime after the events on Zeltros. And apparently because they don't. It's all done through exposition. Because it's not bad, but it's definitely very rushed, and you feel the rushing that everybody knows this is the last chapter, and they're trying to pack as much explanation for things as they can into this. And basically, after the whole thing on Zeltros, where they had their first run-in with the Toph, the Alliance of Free Planets has decided to make at least a temporary alliance with the Nagai until the Toph have been defeated. And so you have our heroes, including Leia's boy band and Danny, and other guys like Fen, working side by side, very reluctantly, with the likes of Knife and Den. And there's really not much else, and there's really not much to it. The story is pretty straightforward. It's apparently the Toph go by a hereditary monarchy thing, and the Crown Prince, heir to the throne, is overseeing this attack on this one little planet. And basically the plan is to take him prisoner. Maybe use him as a bargaining chip to force an end to the fighting. And basically, most of the stuff is either exposition or used to emphasize the fact that, some people like Han and Danny really, really, really do not trust the Nagai and really, really do not like working with them. But apparently it's not just the rebellion and the Nagai. There are even some former Imperials that have decided, they'd rather not be ruled over by the Toph. And so are working with them. And in fact, Den brings that up to say, you're more welcoming to them than you are to us, even though the Empire isn't that much different. Yes, we're ruthless bastards, but I get the sense that you would do the same thing if you felt it would save the people you care about. We're not so different, you and I, that old chestnut. He might technically be right, but it's still, again, because this last chapter is really rushed, it doesn't come off as very convincing, this argument. Anyway, the other significant detail here is that because the Nagai have decided to work with the Alliance of Free Planets against the Toph, their old enemy, Lady Lumia is apparently still alive, and she's basically decided to work with the Toph because, again, now that the Nagai have sided with Luke Skywalker, who she really, really hates, they are now her enemy as well. So, that classic chestnut. But they manage to infiltrate the prince's palace, disguised as prisoners, because apparently they find like a Toph, they capture him, and basically force him to play their jailer. Otherwise he gets a bolt to the back. But then, basically the Nagai Alliance strike team, ditches the disguise and falls upon the unprepared Toph, including the prince. Lumia is the only one who really puts up a decent fight because, again, the Toph are completely surprised, and and unlike Lumia, they're not force sensitive. In fact, Lumia almost kills Leia, but then suddenly one of the Toph actually shoots her. Supposedly she's dead, but of course, later in after the New Jedi Order series, Lucasfilm would sort of bring her back as a significant antagonist in the storylines that followed. Meanwhile, up in space, Lando is leading the Alliance Nagai fleet to basically take out the Toph fleet, basically preventing them from extracting the prince to safety. And it's revealed that the Toph that shot Lumia was Bay, Han's childhood friend, and it turns out, Knife's half-brother. Because, there's that whole the potential for conflicted loyalties, that's no longer a problem now that technically Han and Knife are working on the same side, albeit, through gritted teeth on both their parts. But, Prince Sereno of the Toph has been captured. And basically, that's where the chapter ends with Luke, and, for that matter, the series ends. That basically, for the first time, there's actually some hope that this will that this will all be over soon. And so again, it's a pretty ambivalent. I don't know if they ever, apart from maybe the occasional exposition in a passing backstory reference, that they've ever referred to the Nagai and the Toph in future Star Wars media. They probably do, but only as an aside exposition. But yeah, that is Star Wars Marvel 1977, the very first Star Wars comic ever made. And as I've said repeatedly in other streams, you can clearly see how in many ways, even in the pre-Disney days, that a lot of this stuff would either be rendered non-canon by future, much better Star Wars stories. But there's still a lot of interesting stuff to see here. Even if, I don't begrudge people who are very old school fans and who grew up reading this comic. If they like it, I don't begrudge them that. Obviously, it's got a lot of weak points, but it also does have some interesting and even some genuinely good stuff. And it is interesting to look at what Star Wars was like back in the day. Because again, while technically the expanded universe existed from the moment that, say, this comic and Splinter of the Mind's Eye were written in the 70s, it really was around the 90s with the success of Dark Empire and the Thrawn trilogy that Lucasfilm really decided to focus hard on a serious continuity and, what we now consider canon. Because at that point, to them, as long as it didn't contradict the film explicitly, it was canon. And even then, they had series where you could tell little one-off stories set in the Star Wars universe, and no one was going to break a sweat over it, even if it did. But again, the focus on canonicity and continuity only really became a thing in the 90s. But yeah, that is Star Wars Marvel 1977. It's been an interesting ride. I can't say that I fully enjoyed it because, again, there's a lot of stuff that's pretty weak and stuff that's simply been done better in future Star Wars stories. But again, I choose to view this series as an interesting artifact of Star Wars early history. And so if you too are interested in looking at it and reading it and even enjoying it, by all means do so. And that is it. The last stream of December. Regular content will be back hopefully in the middle of January probably earlier, because like I've got all the recording done for my latest round of videos. I just need to do the editing part. So I hope you guys all have a happy new year. Thank you very much, and I appreciate those of you who tuned in especially. Have a good day.